Well, at least we're not in for a slow start to Euro 2024, are we? Scotland and Germany made sure of that. Scotland, I'm going to just say it right off the bat, I thought were horrific. I was so disappointed with how Scotland set up against this Germany team. Played to their strengths in the worst way. Whatever you think of this Germany team in terms of where their qualities lie and their deficiencies, Scotland made it easy for them to play their game. Didn't react well to Germany's style, didn't cope well with the movements of players, and they got exposed throughout the game. Not helped by near enough half-time sending off by Ned Porteous with an attempted assassination of İlkay Gündoğan's shins. The damage was done by that point anyway, because it was already 2-0. The penalty made it 3. And the second half was a bit of cruise control from Germany. And there were several reasons Germany dominated so well, but we're going to go over the in-possession first. Okay, so when Germany would set up an attack, they would set up in a sort of 3-1-5-1, unorthodoxly. It would be Jonathan Tah as the central centre-back, Rudiger as the right centre-back. Toni Kroos would drop into this left centre-back position to get on the ball in these deeper areas and be the main source of progression in Germany's build-up play. André took up a position between the defence and midfield line. He wasn't really used to get on the ball as much. He was used as a bit of a decoy to occupy some of these central midfielders from Scotland. The wing-backs pushing on, Mittelstadt into this left side, Joshua Kimmich in the right, which allowed Wirtz and Musiala to come in central alongside Gundogan with Havertz, the 4 central players. And this is where Scotland's shape really broke down with these 4 central players. If you haven't seen the Germany setup already under Julian Nagelsmann, if you didn't watch my video, it is mainly built around the vertical movement of these 4 players. In behind, coming deep for the ball, and Scotland just couldn't live with it. So an example would be, you'd see Havertz maybe try and stretch this back line, dragging some of these defenders back, which left more space in between the line. Sometimes you'd see Musiala on the side coming deep to receive it from the deeper players, and as a result, that would maybe shift a midfielder or two over to try and cover the space, and as a result, it meant that Wirtz remaining, it meant that Gundogan could then make little movements into space to receive the ball from a Toni Kroos into these areas. And there's several reasons as to why this was such a good move for Germany and so poorly defended against by Scotland. One, they left Toni Kroos completely unmarked. It felt like there was a complete lack of respect for what you could do with the football. There were the occasional times where John McGinn and Scott McTominay on this side would jump to press when he received the ball, but it wasn't intense and it wasn't anywhere near close to winning the ball. It never felt like Toni Kroos was under any real pressure. And the issue that occurred when that happened was, let's say if John McGinn comes up to press here, it would leave Scotland defending with a 3 in midfield, still with a lot of space in between the lines. And as a result, Musiala would pull out into this left-hand side, and you'd see him and Mittelstadt combine on this left-hand side, usually to get Musiala in the ball, where he could drive in diagonally with the ball at his feet. You'd see Havertz try and move the defence back like this. You'd see Wirtz making an angle out here. So there'd be plenty of movement to occupy the back 3 and allow Musiala to play his game, which is direct dribbling in tight spaces to create chances. And he had so much opportunity to do it down this left-hand side and in the left half space, and he would interchange with Mittelstadt. Sometimes you'd have Mittelstadt coming into this area here and have Musiala out wide, so Musiala could receive the ball from Mittelstadt into this left wing area and drive down to the byline, where he could then cut in and create chances from the inside, which he did a lot more, especially as the game went on. And that was always an issue, was that left-hand side. The ability for Kroos to find those passes as well, like those passes for him are easy. And that left-hand side caused problems for him all game. And usually when you're in these type of formations, from a defensive point of view, you see the wide centre-backs closing the wide 10s in these positions. The positioning of İlkay Gündoğan made that a bit tougher, and because Scotland's defensive midfielders didn't contribute at all to these group of players, and I will say, Callum McGregor was a little bit deeper than Scott McTominay and Ryan Christie either side of him. Whether that was to protect İlkay Gündoğan specifically, but it really felt like he never got close, and as John McGinn or McTominay would go to press Kroos, he would have to come in and join the 3. So as a result, it left these players in between the lines with a lot more space to occupy, with no real support from the wide centre-backs. And whether it was because they couldn't risk the overload because of İlkay Gündoğan's free position, they were essentially on a 2v3 because the central centre-back was always going to be a bit more bothered by Havertz, who did a fantastic job of using his off-the-ball movement to stretch the defensive line back, create angles he could receive the ball, as he did for the second goal when İlkay Gündoğan turned and played him through. And as a result, it meant that this back 5 only pressed when the ball came to the player. So let's say if, I'll just swap Mittelstadt and Musiala back around. So let's just say if Musiala received it from this deep position, then you'd see Porteous come to try and close him down. But as soon as the ball went back or went to safety, he dropped back in. It was too reactionary. It was too just sort of off the cuff for Scotland. They couldn't deal with it in a detailed and consistent way. And I have to say, a very underrated player from Germany's attacking performance was İlkay Gündoğan, whose positioning in these areas would just do Scotland in, either side of McGregor, either side of McTominay, receiving it on the half turn to play these players through and allow these players to commit to their movements off the ball to stretch the back three, back five as well if the wing backs are dropped in, and he would just take it through and play it. And as I was just speaking about for the second goal, his combination with Havertz was excellent. Allowed Musiala to move into that space in the middle of the box. Very selfless work from a lot of players. They're great off the ball running and class to go with it. Same issues as well if the ball went out to the wide areas, to Kimmich or to Mittelstadt. You'd see maybe the player on this side making that movement down here into the channel to create space here, and you'd have Gündoğan showing for it, you'd have Havertz coming a bit closer, and you'd have Musiala occupying space that then the Scotland midfield had to react to and try and get back in, which again they failed to do time and time again. And as a result, it meant that they could either play that pass into the centre of the pitch, play that pass in to the channel for Wirtz or Musiala on the other side to run into, or he could use his crossing ability from these open play positions to find a Musiala or a Wirtz at the back post, or even Mittelstadt making a late run into the back post. And it just all contributed to Scotland feeling like they were never ever really getting close to any of Germany's players. The vertical movements done them in, and as I was saying, it just meant they didn't know whether they could come up to press, it didn't know whether they could drop off, with no support from the midfield. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the back five were good by any means, but the fact that the midfield just didn't seem to contribute to any of the defensive qualities was so poorly played out by Steve Clarke and his game plan. They should have had a man-marking job by at least one or two of these midfielders to try and get to Wirtz or Gündoğan and give that defence a bit of help, at least at Gündoğan. Surely someone, whether that be McGregor, who is the most disciplined, had to follow Gündoğan around, and it meant that the wide centre-backs could focus purely on Wirtz and on Musiala, which they didn't. And the wing-backs could then mark wing-backs, and it would have just felt like a more targeted game plan. It would have left the wide players to go and close up the wide centre-backs to stop him from getting on the ball. Again, the fact that Kroos was allowed the time and space to play the football that he wants to play with his long passing range. He connected with 101 out of 102 passes. That's sensational. I thought the wing-backs for Scotland as well struggled with Germany's wing-backs. Couldn't really get close, defended poorly on transition. And when Porteous went off, they made a substitution where Che Adams went off, and it allowed them to sit in a 5-3-1, Ryan Christie moving as the striker, and they closed up space in between the lines where they just sat deep and soaked up pressure. They still conceded 2 goals, but they weren't as open, as exposed as they were prior to that. Che Adams, while he was on the pitch, didn't really contribute anything off the ball. I didn't think he really had any role that was implemented by the coaching staff. Was just sort of filling a space, wasn't blocking a passing lane, wasn't really up to much, and just contributed to an all-round poor performance from Scotland. But full credit to Germany. Used the quality of their players to full extent. I was a bit critical of them before the tournament started. I'm not going to change my mind on that because I thought Scotland was so poor, but credit where it's due, they had to win the game their way and they did it. But how did Scotland attack the few times they did try to attack? So a lot of the times when they'd win the ball back, it would be to go long and have Che Adams work the channels, to try and work across to Rudiger or work across to Tah. The only issue is that he physically was not a match for those centre-backs. He's a good workhorse, Che Adams. He does put a shift in, but he was just up against 2 top defenders in Tah and Rudiger, and he didn't get any joy against them. I was quite surprised they didn't work this channel where Toni Kroos was enough in transition, because that is a weakness. He doesn't have the legs to go against an athletic player, and defensively he's not amazing. He does well with his positioning and his reading of the game, but physically and athletically he lacks. Didn't test that side anywhere near enough in transition. And again, when they would sustain attacks, like that twice it happened in the game, this is kind of the shape it would end up in. So Scotland would build up in a sort of 3-2-4-1, I guess you can say, with 3 centre-backs, Porteous, Hendry and Kieran Tierney playing as a traditional back 3, Scott McTominay in the right centre midfield position, Callum McGregor in the left, Andy Robertson pushing on at left wing back and Anthony Ralston at right wing back, with John McGinn in the right half space, Ryan Christie in the left and Che Adams up top. They would try and build up a little bit shorter and a little bit slower than I would thought to try. I feel like in this position it's prime, trying to work the channels, maybe get the technical players on the ball quickly in these scenarios in McGinn and Ryan Christie, who are decently press resistant, who do have the technical ability to play forward and maybe search out the wing backs. And it didn't happen anywhere near enough, to be honest with you. But Germany would press high, they'd press man-to-man, they'd have it on the striker, they'd have the two wide players, wide 10s, mark the wide centre-backs. So you'd have Wirtz coming onto Tierney, you'd have Musiala coming onto Porteous, you'd have the two centre midfielders taking care of their two deeper centre midfielders. The wing-backs would follow the opposing wing-backs and try and win the ball off them in this position if the ball went to this area. Same on the other side. And you'd have Andrić mark the side of the player that mark the attacking player on the side it was being built up on. So let's just say if the ball gets played out to the right and McGinn tries to show for it, Andrić will come up and mark and try and stop him from getting on the ball. If Che Adams starts showing for it in this position, which he would, they would try and play it down into the channels to get him working across. The centre-back on that side would cover around, which would allow the opposite centre-back to be a bit more cautious of the run over here, but he would never try and make that run in behind. It would always be coming short to receive the ball to feet. That's how he would play. But the press from Germany was intense. They stopped Scotland from playing. Physically, they won all their duels. It was just a very poor performance from Scotland. Didn't get the use of the technical players enough. I thought they didn't deal well with the ball under pressure. Why they didn't keep trying to bypass that pressure a bit more. Why it was McTominay playing in the deeper area, who's not great with the ball at his feet under pressure, and Christie wasn't, who's been playing that role for Bournemouth all season. Even McGinn plays deep as well for Villa when needed. Scott McTominay would surely be into this position with Che Adams trying to work the centre-backs either side and look for second balls and look to receive the ball from the more technical players if they manage to find room to play. And as a result, it just meant Christie and McGinn weren't as involved in the game in these attacking areas as much because Scotland couldn't get the ball up to them. They just found nothing of it. So Germany did their bit, they pressed high, stopped Scotland from getting on the ball, and it was just the perfect performance from them, really. Did their job in attack, did their job in defence, and comfortable win, 5-1. Shout out to the fullbacks, Emre Can and Nicholas Füllkrug's absolute thunderblast of a shot, puts it into the back of the net, and Germany give themselves a strong foothold to go into the next round. The tougher game's still to come for Germany in Hungary and Switzerland, and again for Scotland. It's going to be interesting to see if they can get out of this group, but stranger things have happened. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Euro 2024 fully underway, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers, lads, in a bit.